Well, today we're continuing our series called Relationship Goals, and today we're going to be specifically talking about the phases and stages of marriage. And some of you in the room are like, oh no, I came to the wrong week because I'm not married. I'm single or widowed or maybe just dating. And I want you to know that's okay, because some of the things that we'll be talking about today are kind of universal truths to relationships. Some of the things that we'll be talking about today will help you understand how to handle conflict and hardship and crisis when it hits your life, because some of it is not excluded to only married people. And so I want you to sit back and relax, but also take out your pen and your notes from your program and follow along, because I think that each and every one of us has a message from the Holy Spirit that we could learn from his scripture readings today. And so with that said, I'd love to open up today's message with a verse. Genesis chapter 8, verse 22. Here's what it says. As long as the earth endures, nothing will put stop to planting and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night. When I read that verse, it reminds me that tomorrow is a-coming. Does anyone know that? Like tomorrow will be another day. And no matter how gloomy or messed up your life may be, tomorrow is coming. And I don't want to tell you that to try to get the anxiety to flare up. I want you to look at it like an optimist, kind of like how I look at it, where the glass is half full. And I think, well, today might have been the worst day of my life, but tomorrow I get another shot of life. I get another opportunity to try to walk with God and see if I can make it a little bit better than today. And if I can, then tomorrow is a better day than today. But this verse kind of is the theme of what we're going to be walking through today, because we're going to have to wrestle with what do we do when something happens that we're uncomfortable about, when we feel crisis has hit our life or our marriage, our relationships, and our family. Like, what do we do? Do we allow it to be all-consuming and overwhelming, or do we choose to partner with Jesus to move forward in life? Here's the big idea for today's message. Life's seasonal shifts will be both expected and unexpected. Now, here's what this means. You're going to have times in life where you're stepping into phases, stepping into seasons, and you know that things are just going to change. For example, we know as we age as humans, things will shift in our life. We'll feel relationship shifts, or just in general, things will shift. Think about it. When you're young and a teenager, your bodies are healthy and you're cute and everything is still tight, right? But as we get older, things loosen up, a little extra love for everybody else to love on, right? Just a little bit more there for us. Our knees and our arms and our bodies start to give out as we age and get older, right? When you go from a teenager to a young adult, from a young adult to just, I guess, an adult, is that what you call it? Then from an adult to maybe an empty nester, from an empty nester to a retiree, from a retiree to your golden years, as we're finishing off, coasting into the sunset with Jesus, looking for the next life ahead with him. We realize that those are different seasons of life. We realize that things will be different in those seasons. We kind of expect it, right? You're expecting life to shift in those seasons. We also have expectations like, when you choose to fall in love, when you choose to get engaged, there's some shifting going on in your world. When you choose to get married, things will shift forever, right? When you choose to start a family, that's going to shift everything for you. Those seasons will feel different. And so we have some expected change that will come at us in life. But then there's the unexpected. We know things are going to come at us that we're not expecting. Like maybe the day where you lose your job and now you're not sure how you're going to make ends meet anymore. Maybe it's the day that you find out that your spouse is pregnant and we're not planning to have another child. Unexpected shift happens. Maybe it's something that you did or your spouse did that isn't so grand, and now it's kind of messing with the relationship and the marriage. Because the reality is we're all broken people. There's not a human in this room or not a human on earth that isn't messed up. We all have flaws. We're all not perfect. And eventually, our spouse will hurt us and shift our marriage. And the truth is, eventually you'll do the same to the spouse. So here's what we can know about life's seasonal shifts. The first thing we need to know about them is that they can be discouraging and disorienting. Aren't I just a ball of fun today for you? Nothing but good news for you. Okay, the way I look at this, because I'm a pastor and I have to do premarital counseling, you know what I find is hilarious? No one ever stops these newlyweds to tell them just how difficult and hard life will be. No one's pulling the bride and groom over on their wedding day and saying, hey, I know that you're all smitten kittens right now, like you guys are obsessed with each other, the hormones are going, you're thinking this is great, you're going into the honeymoon season. But it's going to be hard, it's going to be challenging, there's going to be days that you hate your life, there's going to be times you do not want to be married, there's going to be crisis. And if that's not bad enough that you two have to get along, the world changes around you. And eventually, no one ever says this, but eventually you'll have to watch all your family members that are older than you age and die, and you'll be there alone as a couple for each other to lean on. No one ever says that to the bride and groom on the wedding day, right? You know why? Because you leave that for the pastor to have to clean up that mess in the premarital counseling. He could be the bearer of bad news. Okay, I see how it is. Leave it to me to say all those bad things. Again, there will be shifts in our marriage when things happen both expected and unexpected. And like I said earlier, there's going to be a shift eventually because we do something. There's going to be shifts because we do good things in our marriage, and there'll be a shift because we do bad things in our marriage. Some of them are things that we really can't control, and some of them are things that your spouse or you have done. I mean, think about it. When you or your spouse have something happen to you, there's a shift. What about mental health, anxiety, depression? That's a very personal thing that happens to you specifically or to your spouse specifically, but it impacts everybody in the family. They just want the best for you. They don't understand it, but they're hoping they can help you get through it. There's a shift when stuff like that happens in your marriage. What about when you find out that you or your spouse physically struggle with infertility? A shift happens in the marriage. And we start to wonder if this dream that we had starts to die of being a mom and a dad. No, it doesn't have to end. There are plenty of people here at Wilson Avenue that have found a way around infertility, and I'd love to introduce them to you so you can grow in this area. Plenty of opportunity to be mom and dad. But it causes a shift. What about when a spouse does something to dishonor the vows that they said on that wedding day? It causes a shift. Maybe they're dishonoring the vows because they married and you were rich and now you're not so rich and now they're wondering why they're with you, right? For richer or for poor, that was said on that day, right? And a shift has now happened. Even if they stick with you, even if they choose to love you regardless of your finances, there's a shift. There's an adjustment period in that marriage. Maybe your health is going down the drain. Maybe it's diabetes or cancer or some other thing that's happening in your life. Something that you can't control. And they're like, man, this is too much of a project. And they dishonor the vows. Again, for sickness and health. We said those things, right? Or maybe they dishonor the vows by looking outside the marriage for love and affection and lust. It causes shifts when we go through these seasons. Maybe your shift that's happening in your marriage is with adult children choosing to walk away from the way that you raised them. Maybe they're walking away from faith. Maybe they're just not living lives that you planned and dreamed and prayed and showed them to live. Maybe they're just going the other way. And that will cause a strain on the marriage because you'll want to know what to do as a parent, and the whole family will shift. And you'll shift as a married couple as you try to figure out what to do. Or maybe one day you wake up and you realize you're cohabitating. You're not in love. In fact, you feel like the marriage license that you have is like a legal contract of just being friends. That together we're going to be friends that care for each other, and I got love for you like the common man I have love for. Like, I want everybody to have a good life and not hurt and die. But really, we're in this together financially to help raise these kids and pay for the bills. And we've got some rules as friends. You're cohabitating. You're no longer living like married people. And usually that's after many, 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 many shifts in the marriage, either ones you acknowledged, ones you were naive to, or you just turned your head and didn't want to look at what was happening, didn't want to address it, didn't want to do the hard work. And when shifts like this happen in the marriage, it's easy to point fingers at one another, to blame each other, to say, if you would just live life different in this marriage, if you would have done this and this and this, maybe I wouldn't feel this way, maybe we wouldn't have done this. And it gets easy to push each other further away when conflict and tension raise in the marriage. You know, I remember in my life, one of the most life-altering shifts that happened in my marriage with Stephanie was when we decided to have children. And she was young and dumb. I'm older than her, but I'm just joking. She was not dumb. I was old and dumb. That's how I should say it. I'm going to get in trouble. Can we edit that? Where's the bleep button? They're going to think I'm saying all kinds of bad stuff at church. Okay. I was old and dumb, and she was young and naive. We'll say it that way. And we decided to have kids, and I wanted to have one, maybe two. She wanted to have 4 kids. She was from 4. She was one of 4. She thought 4 was a good number. And I'm like, oh, my goodness. What are you trying to do to me, woman? So we'll talk about that later. Let's start with number 1. And so we had baby Judah, and here he is. We have baby Judah, and then we're like, parenting is easy. Why do people complain? We put the baby in the car seat. We can go out to dinner still. The baby comes to our friend's house. He sleeps most of the time, and when he's awake, people are like, oh, the baby. And we're just young enough that it's still a cute novelty to have a baby. If you wait till you're later in life, like in your mid to late 30s, it's no longer fun to hold other people's babies as much. I mean, some people like them, but when you're in your 20s, it's like this new thing that no one's experienced. So it's like, ooh, let me try this out. Let me hold your baby for a little bit. And so, in our 20s, she's having a baby, and people are holding this baby, and it's fun. And we think, this is a cinch. Let's not wait to have number 2. Let's have number 2 now. And so here came baby Ezra, number 2, on his way. And again, it was busier, but it wasn't impossible. And so we're like, what are people complaining about parenting? This is a cinch. And I'm like, babe, you were right. Having more babies is great. It's like we are multiplying the love in our house that we get to have. Let's go ahead and go with number 3, like you said. And so baby Levi was on his way. And then something happened. The first 2 grew up a little bit and became extremely difficult. And we knew we were in trouble. And then people would lie. People at church, good Christian men and women, would lie to us. And when baby number 3 came and we're like pulling our hair out and thinking we need backup, Mayday, someone come help us. We are outnumbered. We're on zone defense now. They would say, well, Pastor Chris, 4 is easier than 3. I'm like, how does that math add up? And I can't give that 4th back once he or she is here. So no, we're done. 3 is impossible. I mean, I remember the day that I woke up and I thought a bomb had gone off in the next room. This is what I walked into. Oh, I lied. That's my babies. That's when they were cute still. Isn't that sweet? There wasn't a bomb in the bathtub, I promise you. That's what I walked into. I was like, what was going on in here? And they couldn't even talk yet, and they're doing these kinds of things. And that's when I knew the Bible was right. We are all born sinners. Look at them. And then later in the day, Ezra, my middle son's trying to spring Levi out of the crib, as if Levi could walk yet on his own. He's holding on for dear life to see what's going on outside of that crib. We love our children, and we love being parents, but having 3 babies under 3 was a very life-altering decision. It was a shift in our marriage. I mean, I remember when they were just little babies, all 3 were in diapers at once. I would stand in front of this changing stable. Stephanie would pick a baby up, lay him down. I'd change a diaper. I'd put a baby down, and I'd look up, and there'd be another baby sitting right there. And I wish I could tell you one more when it was done. It just seemed like a cycle. It did it over and over and over. I'd stand there for an hour, it felt like, changing diapers. And then those tense moments when we snap because you're lacking a sleep, babies screaming in the night, trying to feed, trying to change, trying to just keep this baby alive. It gets easy to want to point fingers and get mad at each other as a couple of, why did we do this? This is all your fault. You wanted this. A shift happened in the marriage. Now, having a kid was a blessing. I'm not complaining that I'm a dad of 3 boys. I love those boys dearly. I'd take a bullet for those 3 boys. But it was a shift. It was a strain, and we had to learn as a couple, how do we proceed? The same is true when we moved to Sweet Home, Alabama from California. Now, I've loved living in Alabama. I love California too, but I loved living in Alabama. You guys are sweet. I love Wilson Avenue. I love the South. I love fried chicken. So life is good down here, right? I don't know about the crawfish. That's a little gross, but I'll eat more fusakli. You eat more of the crawfish. We'll call it a day. And you guys have this southern hospitality. I mean, you want to be friends with people. Every time I go to the grocery store, I feel like I made a new best friend, talking to someone in the aisle, thinking, is it weird to exchange phone numbers with you and be friends? Everyone is just so nice. Here's some photos of my kids. You can just scroll through them, moving here, going through the plane ride to Alabama on their first flight out here when my family officially moved here. We love it here in Alabama, but I would be lying to you if there wasn't tension in our marriage at times because we live in Alabama. Now, here's what this means. We moved away from our network and our family. And you are now our community, and we're building these relationships. But relationships take time and investment. And you guys, I know you're great at being friends, but it takes time to be family, right? It takes showing up season in, season out. And as great as a person who loves you in your church could step in to be family, nothing's going to replace grandma and grandpa, right? My kids have some deep love for a lot of you surrogate grandma and grandpas in the room, but there's just a tender, sweet spot in their heart for their real mama and papa back in San Diego. And when holidays come around, you better believe there's a tension in our marriage because we don't get to gather. Like, you probably have Easter brunch plans. I've already been told, don't you do 2 services on Easter? We got brunch to get to. I'm like, we're only talking about the risen Lord, but okay, we'll go to brunch. I guess that's where we draw the line in the South, food. But for us, and even though we'll probably crash your Easter brunches, don't worry, I'll be there eating all your food. You'll say, I wish Pastor Chris would just go. It's different than being at my family's house and my wife's family house, right? It's different at Christmas time. We can't fly back at Christmas. I looked at the price. I said, babe, we either have Christmas here in Alabama or we don't pay the mortgage for 2 months and don't pay the power bill, because it is $5,000 to get out there to California at Christmas for 3 days. It's just not worth it. And so we have to make new plans. I'm not complaining, just saying there's tension, there's shifting, and you have to work through these things. Maybe you are in a place where that seems like small potatoes in your marriage. You've got major hardship going on, major pain going on in your marriage. You got a struggle that you feel is beyond that. There's major tension going on in your marriage. And I want to encourage you, because we're going to talk about what to do with that in a moment. You have an option when that major problem starts to happen in your marriage. No matter what it is, if it's an affair, if it's moving across the country, if it's cohabitating, if you want your marriage to survive, you've got to make a decision. Because this decision that you have got to make, we either end this relationship or push it forward. And the way I look at it, no matter what crisis you're in right now, you've got one of 2 options. You could choose to be bitter, or you could choose to be better. You could choose to be bitter, or you could choose to be better. You can let the bitterness of him or her doing that rip you apart. You could let the bitterness of you blowing it that way to rip you apart. For this situation that was out of your control to rip you apart, and you could be bitter. Bitter at God, bitter at someone who did this to you guys. Whatever your situation is, you can choose to be bitter or better. Better would be saying, hey, as a couple, together, when spouses pay attention, you need to work with your spouse. It takes two to fight for your marriage. Together, we're going to push forward. We're going to connect with Jesus. We're going to do the work that's needed, if it's marriage counseling, a support, small group, whatever it is, to move forward and get past this season, because we're going to be better. And I believe when you choose to move through a crisis with Jesus and your spouse, you don't just get better, but you also have scar tissue. We'll talk about that in a moment. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 11 says this: He does everything just right on time, but people can never completely understand what he is doing. Sometimes we want to think, why did God let this happen? It's more of like, what is God going to do now that this has happened? So here's why I say you could be better. If you choose to be better and you choose to work through it with Jesus and not to lean on bitterness, not to look at that opening verse where we're like, oh great, another day comes tomorrow. Christmas will come again this season and I have to deal with this drama, this pain. Instead of that and working through it optimistically, knowing that Jesus has good plans for your life, choosing to pursue him, we can actually turn something that was a crisis and a brokenness, this tension, this marriage shift, into this, an enriching and rewarding. If we let God in to walk through it with us, these seasonal shifts can be enriching and rewarding. Not all your pain has to be brokenness long term. And yes, some things will naturally be expected and unexpected seasonal shifts that will immediately be enriching and rewarding. Like, I got a new job, I got a big bonus. Yes, okay, we get that. But your crisis can be enriching and rewarding also. I mean, Jesus is in the life-redeeming business. Our Holy Spirit is here with you in the midst of your crisis. God the Father has not turned his face from you. He's watching. They're working in community. 3 and 1, 1 and 3, working in community to want to enrich your life and use this crisis as an opportunity. Well, what does that mean? Well, we said it last week and I think the week before, your pain doesn't only have to hurt. God can teach us a whole lot of information while we're going through pain. And in my opinion, no matter what crisis you have, maybe it's an affair in your marriage, and you're bitter that they did this to you. As a couple, if you choose to work past this, to let God into the situation, to move forward, to forgive, to maybe go to counseling to learn how to forgive. Not saying that it won't be in your past anymore. Yes, it's in your past. But if you get past this, I think your marriage will be stronger, because I believe you'll have scar tissue in your marriage. I have a big scar here on my arm. I imagined this sermon with a short sleeve shirt on, but I did not think of that when I got dressed this morning. I was going to show you my scar. Lucky you don't get to see my scar today. I have a scar on my arm. I used to have this weird lump that would grow, and so they kept cutting open and pulling the lump out of my arm. I know it's TMI, but there you go. I got a middle school boy, and I could get worse. You want me to get worse with it? Somebody said no, some are shaking yes. Okay, I'll spare you so you won't puke today. So I have a weird scar on my arm, and every time I wear a short sleeve shirt or when I'm at the beach, I have kids come up to me, "What's that from?" And I lie, because that's the kind of pastor I am. And I said, I was in the Gulf, and a barracuda came and grabbed onto my arm. I don't even know if you have barracudas in the Gulf, but I'm going with it. A barracuda came at me, and it was death blow. It was trying to eat my arm. And you know what I had to do? I had to punch it in the face. And I got the barracuda off me, and the kids' eyes are big, and they run away. Mom, that man punches barracudas. That's obviously not the truth. But I have a scar on my arm, and they've had to open it up 3 times to keep this lump from growing back. It's all benign and no big deal, other than it's ugly. The first time was no problem. In just regular doctor's office, sliced it open, pulled it out, stitched you up. Stitches dissolve in a few weeks. Good to go. The second time, they really had to work to get through it. 'The third time in, they had to call a plastic surgeon in. No, not because of this. This is all natural, okay? You can't buy this. Some say you need a refund if you bought that. But they had to have someone who's an expert in the cutting scar tissue come in because it's really thick and difficult tissue. Your marriage can be the same way. Now, our culture would say where you have scarring, hide it. I say flaunt it, okay? Show the world that a crisis cannot destroy your marriage, that Jesus and your spouse are going to move through whatever hits your marriage. If you guys did something to blow it or something horrible happened to you, you're going to let that scar tissue shine because you want the rest of the world to know my marriage is stronger than your marriage. We might have faced difficulty, but my God got me through that difficult time. My spouse and I have been working on it, and look, we can survive. You don't know if you could survive. You don't have the scar tissue that I have, but I know we can take a harder blow than you can take because we've got scar tissue. That's how Jesus works in our relationships. That's how Jesus will work in your marriage if you give your marriage to him. If you do the work as a couple, if you take the steps and put your pride aside, do the work. Go through it. Romans 8:28 says this, we are confident that God is able to orchestrate everything to work towards something good and beautiful when we love him and accept his invitation to live according to his plan. There's the secret right there. Would you underline to live according to his plan? To live according to his plan. If you want to be better, not bitter, you've got to start living a life that lines up with what God's plans are for your life so he can get you through it. Genesis chapter 6 is this. So let's not get tired of what we are doing. At the just right time, we will reap a harvest of blessing if we don't give up. If you are trying Jesus on for size, keep this verse up for a moment. If you're trying Jesus on for size, like I'm going to try this Jesus thing, I've come to church twice now, and I'm going to see if God restores my marriage, if God fixes my crisis, if God helps me work out this mess I've created in my life. Well, my guess is your brokenness probably took more than 2 days of your life. And also I would say keep pursuing Jesus, keep pursuing his plan for your life, keep working it. Because if you give up, you might be giving up right before the blessing and the harvest take place. That's like quitting your job before payday, right? Don't give up. Keep pushing forward. And so I want to give you 4 things that are going to help you with this application. 4 growth choices in any season. Number 1, I want to encourage you to trust God. Trust in God's love and intentions for you. We've already kind of talked about that, right? God's in the life-redeeming business. He loves you just the way you are. He loves you too much to leave you the way that you are. He wants your marriage to thrive. He wants your marriage to soar. And regardless if people are right or wrong about if you two should have been married at all, God can make that marriage awesome as long as you two are willing to do the work. Regardless how hard, how crummy your life is right now, God's got plans for your life. Plans of good. Let me say that again. No matter where you feel your life is at, you feel your life is in a terrible place, you feel your life can't get better, it's not true. God's got plans for your life, and they're plans of good. Number 2 in your notes, prioritize your primary relationships. Prioritize your primary relationships. When tragedy strikes, we have an opportunity. We talked about this last week. To run to coping mechanisms. Maybe for you it's a bottle. Maybe for you it's something else, codependency. Maybe it's some kind of relationship outside the marriage. Maybe it's going and doing an activity away from the marriage that isn't even a sin or anything wrong, but you're just using it as a coping mechanism. I want to encourage you to prioritize your primary relationships. I remember a couple of years ago, I had a big blow. There was like an opportunity. I thought it was going to be the church that God called me to. I mean, I really felt it. I was praying for it. The current pastor was telling me, yeah, the board's going to love you. We're going to go forward with this. And it didn't work out. And I felt crushed. I was like, really had my heart set on it. I leaned into my family that day. I felt like my world was collapsing because I didn't like my current job I was in. I was ready to move on. This was going to be an amazing season we were going into, and I was leaning into our family relationships. And when I say lean in, make more time. Let them be around you. Enjoy your children, enjoy your spouse, date your family, date your kids. When you're going through it, lean into your primary relationships. Don't just lean in for comforting's sake. Cultivate your primary relationships. Nurture them. Pour into them. Realize the value of your primary relationships. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 says this, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. The third thing I want to encourage you to do is communicate clearly and often. Communicate clearly and often. I have a couple doctor friends, medical doctor friends, and I was at lunch with him one day, and I asked him, I get it. There's things that happen to people that are uncontrollable, and they're going to get sick and need a doctor to come in and do something to help them survive. But what is your best advice for people who are somewhat healthy today? And he told me, majority of the people that he sees, that a little proactive life maintenance would avoid a lot of the issues they got health-wise. Eating right, exercising. I know, it's a novel idea. You'd be amazed if you do that over time, how healthier you would be as a human. He said it'd probably cut my clients in half. I'd be able to focus on those that are really in need of a doctor that can't fix it on their own ahead of time. I feel like that's where our relationships are. If we were a little bit more proactive in our marriages and not waiting for it to be like a disaster, then we're reactive. Okay, I get it. It's ending, so now I'll try marriage counseling. It's ending, so now I'll try to learn to communicate with you. Instead, if we were just a little bit more proactive, maybe it would make all the difference in your marriage. Maybe it wouldn't go to Disasterville so quickly on you. Week 1 in the message, I gave you 3 questions for you to sit down with your spouse and talk about them. They're so important that I'm going to give it to you today. I think I included it on the outline even for you today. So I'm going to encourage you, your homework is to sit down and have some conversations with your spouse, to be proactive. Let me share how this can look. First, you're not going to do this when you're in an argument, okay? It's not like you're screaming at each other, that's it, we got to ask the questions because we're falling apart right now. No, that's not a healthy time to try to get into it. People are going to talk out of emotions. When you're calm and everything's okay, you're going to sit down and have a conversation. Now, here's how this works, because I wasn't clear enough the first time. I want to be super clear. When you are asking these questions, you're going to be tempted to raise some walls up, to be like, that's not how it is. You are delusional. You don't understand. You're not seeing this clearly. When you're asking the questions, your job is to shut up, okay? Don't say a word. Be quiet. You may take a pen and write some things down because you might forget, and that's okay. But you're not to debate them. Here's what I'm talking about. The first question would be, currently, what are you concerned about? If you sit down and be like, hey, honey, I love you. I want to continue to help our marriage soar, or I see our marriage is kind of in a tough spot. What's your biggest concerns going on right now in our life and in our marriage? And then they might start responding. You're going to feel like you should jam in there and give them your opinion and your ideas and how you feel is. Don't. What I learned in marriage counseling was the most important marriage advice I've ever could have been given, and I try to give it out freely to save you some dough in marriage counseling. You see, I would make the mistake of, you're wrong, you don't understand, you're totally off base. Let me tell you how it really is. And the counselor told me, Chris, you might be 100% correct, and she might be 100% wrong. But what matters more is that she is hurt. What matters more is that she has a concern, that she feels this way. And instead of you trying to pursue this truth and get her over onto your side, you need to be more concerned with where her heart is and where her feelings are and what she's going through and how she feels about this. And so now whenever I upset my wife, regardless if I think she should be upset or not, sometimes I just want to say, get it together. Come on, let's go. Suck it up, and Buttercup, we're going. I remember that counselor saying that words, and I bite my tongue. And I said, babe, what are you concerned about? What are you concerned about? I don't want you to feel this way. What are some ways that I can try to help us avoid this? What can I do on my side? Try to proactively start to work on some of these things. So before the argument, ask, what are you currently concerned about? And then be quiet. Bite your tongue. Even if you disagree with what they're saying, take notes because you're concerned about where they're feeling. And they're going to do this for you too. And you're going to get a chance to share where you're concerned as well. Then you ask, what do you wish this could look like or be like? Like now that they've shared their concern, what do you wish this could look like? So then you have an idea of their expectations in life, of their expectations of you in the marriage and their home and their family. And then finally, the last question is, what can I do to help? What can I do to help? This is you hearing how they would interpret you making a difference on this concern. You see what this has done? This is affirmed. Bring it back. This is confirmed. This is confirmed. I care about your thoughts and how you're feeling. What would you like it to look like? I care about your dreams, how you envision life, what your expectations of life are. I want to do something to help. I want to serve you. I want to make this the best life I possibly can. I might not get there, but I want to do my part to help us get there. Now, go through the 3 questions, then you get a chance when they ask you the 3 questions and go through it. Take some time before you have your sit-down conversation to give this some good thoughts. Don't just do it off the cuff. Really mow it over. So that way when you meet with your spouse, you can really talk this stuff over that's meaningful. Do the work. Be proactive in the relationship. Don't only be reactive in a relationship. Now, I know the struggle with this is like, man, I don't want to start that. But check out what Proverbs 20 says. Knowing what is right is like a deep water in the heart. A wise person draws from the well within. You see, understanding the wisdom in this care of relationship, understanding the need to help your spouse feel affirmed and understood and served, that's marriage advice that's priceless. And if we could just put down our pride for a moment and lean in. And by the way, for those who are not married in a room, this is how you handle conflict with people. You care more about their heart and where they're at. I've used this at work when I have a coworker that I've accidentally steamrolled and they feel a little like mistreated. I care more about what they're feeling in that moment than the reality and the truth because it helps mend the relationships. So some of you are like, well, okay, we'll start that next year, next month. We'll start it when that person deserves for me to start doing this kind of work, to start caring about the marriage shifts in the season in, season out. I'll start serving them when they deserve for me to serve them. I'll start asking them questions about what they care about and what they're concerned about when they deserve that. There's only one problem with that. If you're a Christ follower, that's not the bar that Jesus set for us. In our last series, we talked about where Jesus tells us to live at. He said the night before he was crucified on the cross, love others as I have loved you. That's where Jesus sets the bar. And how much more are we to love our spouse than in that way if he's saying that to love one another as humans that way? You see, Jesus loved you before you deserved that love. Jesus forgave you before you deserved forgiveness. Jesus sacrificed for you before you deserved that sacrifice. Jesus served you before you deserved him to serve you. And so here we are. And he says, that's the bar. And so in your marriage, that's the bar. And so I want you to start today. Start today. Don't wait. Don't wait till tomorrow or next week or date night or when you're alone. Start today. And what I mean starting today, start talking to your spouse today, start working on that marriage today, start choosing to be better, not bitter today. Start today. Start choosing to care more about what your spouse is concerned with than what you're concerned with. Start today. Don't wait. Don't wait till they deserve it because that day may never happen. Start today. And spouses that you see your spouse starting today, don't be a knucklehead and reject it. Sometimes people are just so cold and so hard, they're like, I'm not doing anything. Well, first of all, don't stop starting today if your spouse is like that. Keep at it. Second, you're torpedoing your own marriage. It takes two to fight for the marriage. And if you're not willing to fight for your marriage, who is? Some stranger's not going to fight for your marriage. Your family members can't fight for your marriage like you can. Only you can. So God wants you to fight the good fight. So stop being cold. Stop being hard-hearted. Okay? Start today. Some people say, well, I don't want to start today because even though they started, they're only doing it because Pastor Chris told them to do this. It's not from their heart. Okay. That might be true that they heard it from me, or if they go to marriage counseling one day and the marriage counselor gives some advice and they might try to do what the marriage counselor says, or maybe they read a marriage book and they're trying to do it, or maybe they go to a marriage group and they're trying to do some things different that they're learning in the marriage, and you're like, they're just doing that because they read it, they heard it, they were told to do this. It's still 100% on their own efforts that they're stepping up to the plate and swinging for the fences in your marriage. It's still them stepping out in faith, knowing that more than likely, you're going to push them back. You're going to reject them. And they're still going for it. I think it's bravery. I think it's intelligence. I think it's the most humble we can be when we're willing to make it not about our ideas, not about our opinions, but make it more about you. Don't reject it. Embrace it. Love others as I have loved you, as Jesus says. One last verse as we close out today's message. For those that are thinking, we'll wait for the right time, even Scripture says there isn't ever perfect conditions. Ecclesiastes chapter 11 says, farmers who wait for perfect weather never plant. If they watch every cloud, they never harvest. Are conditions ideal? Nah. Will they ever be ideal? Nah. Start today. Start working on your relationship today. Your marriage is worth it. Would you pray with me? Jesus, I know the tension that can be in our relationships. It can be hard because naturally we want to be bitter. We want to be upset at the brokenness that we find in our relationships. But we need your strength. We need your energy. We need your will, Lord, to choose to be more like you, to choose to be better, not bitter. Help us channel what you offered us, grace, undeserved forgiveness. Help us to forgive our spouse. Help us to serve our spouse. Help us to care about what our spouse is going through and what they're thinking and their concerns. Help us to live as you would have us to live. Help us to live God-honoring lives. Help us to live out the plans that you have for our life and our marriage. Maybe you're sitting here today and you're like, that's it. I need Jesus. I need to recommit my life to Jesus or commit my life to Jesus because I want that Jesus in my marriage that can help me push through this. In your heart and in your mind, just say, I need you, Jesus. He's listening. And if that's you, would you pray this prayer? Jesus, I accept you as Lord of my life. I accept you as God. I accept this forgiveness that you offer that I don't deserve. I accept that you serve me even though I don't deserve it. I accept that you love me even though I don't deserve it. And I accept that you're God of the universe. Help me to live for you. Surround me with other Christ followers that will show me how to live for you. And if you're married, God, I pray that you become the spiritual glue in my marriage and to not let me separate from my spouse. Don't let man separate what you put together, God. Heal the marriages. In Jesus' name, amen.